guys, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we're going to be chatting about the Umbrella Project, which is a resource used in schools globally to help kids develop stronger social and emotional coping skills. I'm reading this because there's a lot to pack in. And you have a new book as well, Dr. Jen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is great. This is so cozy in the cabin, you know?
Yeah. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I started my work as a naturopathic doctor in children's mental health, and very quickly realized that we were missing a lot of the pieces that children need to thrive. I don't know if you're familiar with naturopathic medicine, but naturopathic doctors really treat primarily with nutrition, supplements, sleep, exercise, all the fundamentals to health. But in the mental health space, I came to realize that one thing we were really missing when it comes to parenting and kids' mental health are a really concrete way to teach all of the coping skills that our kids need to thrive. So I think we often dabble in the coping skills, and kind of we'll talk about empathy, and then we'll talk about kindness and a growth mindset. And our kids are learning about sort of a smattering of skills almost by chance. And the skills that they're building are very much by chance, the skills that they have to use when things get difficult. So some of the most empathetic kids, for example, are like that because they've had a lot of interpersonal challenges and they've really had to dive into empathy to protect them from the difficult days. But I think as parents, we can be much more thoughtful and intentional about how we're building coping skills for our kids. So the other side of this coin, I think, too, is that parents are dying a very slow death from information overload, and all the things that we could or should do for our kids can be a huge hit to mental health and well-being for parents. I don't know very many parents who don't feel inadequate in some way, whether it's the food they're feeding their kids or the activities that they're planning or the sports or it's so easy to suddenly feel like you're not doing enough. So the Umbrella Effect, the book that I wrote, is really about unifying all of the skills into one really easy to understand metaphor, having a tool that you can use as a parent to assess how those skills look for your kids and what their umbrella of coping skills looks like, and then picking out the one or two things that you could do to really move the needle for your child's ability to cope with challenges. So that's really the umbrella effect in a nutshell. It means building an umbrella of coping skills to deal with life's rainy days and doing it very intentionally instead of leaving it to chance.
So what got you interested in developing this umbrella effect?
I think a combination of what I was seeing with my patients as I was working and some fundamental issues in the school system and also becoming a parent. So I think I've always had these kind of different channels that I'm seeing the same problem. And I think that problem is that kids have a lot of stress in their life, a lot of rain. And we haven't really caught up as a society in teaching them the coping skills that they need to deal with all of those challenges, right? I think it's easy to say, oh, it seems like kids have it easy these days. But when you actually unpack what kids are dealing with, I think even just the layer of technology and social media is like this invisible stress on them all the time. I talk a lot in the book about the ratio of rain to umbrella skills. And ultimately, we know from the research, there's some great research out of Harvard showing that the ratio of basically positive to negative inputs or coping skills to rain really does predict how well you're going to be doing underneath that challenge, right? So if our kids have lots of coping skills and there's not a lot of stress going on in their life, they're probably doing pretty well, right? They're navigating the day-to-day challenges of life. And if they don't have enough coping skills and it's like a monsoon, they're really not going to be doing well underneath. They're going to start to put the kind of coping skills we don't want them to have in the way, right? So I think like the recognition that we are not keeping up as a society to what our kids need, but also that we're exhausted as a society with trying to keep up to what our kids need, and that we need to be a lot more thoughtful about what we're doing as parents in order to really move the needle. I think those are the combination of that is what led.
Why do you think the trend has gone? Because to me, like you said, people think kids have it easier these days, but honestly, I think in some ways they have it harder because like you said, social media, there's online bullying, there's cyberbullying, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard for these kids to actually get these coping skills? Because it does take some time to teach these skills.
Yeah. Well, I think another layer of it too, it's the cyberbullying and the online, that's the FOMO, that they have to face every day because they just know what their peers are doing way more than we used to. But I think it's also the unbridled access to information before their brains are ready to understand what that information means. I mean, I think about the elections in the States, when it was Trump, and, the amount of information that was coming at me from my kids who were very young then was intense for them to try to understand all the layers of what was happening politically and what the implications of that might be globally. And like, it was just this animal out there that an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old couldn't possibly begin to have the skills to wrap their head around, right? So now they're trying to deal with big people problems in an underdeveloped brain. And parents used to be the gatekeepers of information, right? We used to kind of decide what to tell our kids and when about the world. And now we don't have that anymore. So they just have all this information that we're trying to help them navigate. So I think part of it is that they're overwhelmed from a very early age, and it's really hard to build positive coping skills in an overwhelmed state. We're just in our primitive response brain, right? And we're just doing whatever we can to get through. So even when we're presented an opportunity to learn a coping skill, you have to be in the right state of mind to even do that, right? Have you ever tried to meditate when you're really just not having a good day?
Your mind, and you can't do it.
Exactly. Like, it's really hard to do coping skills or to empathize when you're not in a good place. You have to first be in a calm state and an open-minded state to build these skills. So we have to start early, I think, and recognize what our kids need and, try to help them with that ratio early on.
Do you think it's because a lot of times, like I know when I was growing up, I didn't go to preschool. My mom stayed home. Now that there's not to fault moms for working, but now they're basically parents are working outside of the home. The kids are going to school earlier and at an earlier age, and they're expected to know so much more sooner than what we were expected to learn.
Yeah, certainly. I do think that's a big piece of it. This idea that that there's a set of hoops that we need to jump through at very specific times. Otherwise, we'll never make it in life is sort of an arbitrary construct that doesn't fit most kids' brains, right? That's not how humans develop in a graded path where everybody in grade 1 is doing the same thing and everybody in grade 2, right? Some people's brains are very different, and the school system is certainly not for everybody. So what that early parenting allowed was a little more responsiveness to an individual child's needs. And I mean, I don't know if you have this in your area too, but I think access to, if your child is in childcare, access to childcare that you feel really good about, that is giving them what they need, is also sometimes hard to find. I mean, I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I'm kind of, yeah, I know. Yeah, straddling the most difficult stages of parenting for sure right now, feeling a little tired. But for the 2-year-old, I mean, we had to be on daycare lists years in advance in order to get him into a place that we wanted him to be in. And we never actually did accomplish that. We happened to find a place that for him that we like, but it was not easy to just select, I think this looks like a great spot for you. This aligns with what I want you to be doing at this age. And if we could do that, it would be easier too at a young age, right? So it's not just about parent involvement. It's also about access to the kind of care and support that we want our kids to be having. I think that's a big thing too.
Okay, we'll need to take a brief commercial break, but we will be right back.
Hi, my name is Joanna Kime, and I wanted to share just a little bit about what it's like to be on Chats from the Blog Cabin. Melissa invited me to come on a while back and share about a ministry I volunteer for called Shores of Grace Ministries in Philadelphia. And it was a wonderful experience. I was nervous at the beginning, and it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. But it was really mostly like sitting down and chatting with a friend. You sort of forget that other people may be watching. Melissa helps you relax, asks questions, guides the conversation, and makes it really quite simple. And then I was on again to share about a coaching group that she and I had been a part of together. And again, this time it was with a panel, so a little bit nerve-wracking again, but it went great. She does a wonderful job, and I would gladly do it again.
And that actually was the wrong commercial. I want to put that out there. Joanna does a nonprofit commercial, and I actually hit the wrong thing. So I apologize for that.
No problem. I've heard her nonprofit commercial, and it's very great what they do.
Yeah. So Dr. Jen, we're talking about the social and emotional skills that, kids need to learn. What are some of the most important ones you would think that we need to prioritize as parents to learn?
So there is one that stands out to me, and any room of adults I have ever spoken to, by far the lowest skill, and from my own personal perspective, watching my own kids grow up too, is self-compassion. That is, are you familiar with self-compassion?
I have a hard time with that.
Yeah. Yeah. We all do. I don't think it's something we were ever explicitly taught, but when you think about having something go wrong in your life, failing at something, not doing as well as you wanted to, and then adding a layer of like essentially bullying yourself about it, that's what self-compassion really helps to prevent. It prevents adding insult to injury when something goes wrong in your life. Self-compassion is about being kind to yourself like you would a good friend when you're under challenge. It's about feeling a sense of common humanity, that everybody struggles and that nobody's perfect and it's okay. If you think back to like the social media conversation, I think part of what is hard about that is it kind of eliminates that feeling of common humanity and instead makes you feel like everything is a comparison and everyone's doing better than you. And then it's about just mindfulness and being okay with your story and your feelings and your, humanness. And instead of getting caught up in your own narrative of how your life is falling to pieces, right? Being able to look around and be like, it's okay. Like, this is the human experience. It's going to be hard sometimes. And I think when that skill is in place, everything else is easier.
That's true. We are our own worst critics. There's a lot of fear of judgment of being, if you're vulnerable, what are people going to think about me? Instead of saying, well, I need to just share my truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it feels good to hear someone share their truth. I was listening to another podcast episode that you did recently, and it was a mom with 3 kids who have struggled with their mental health as well. And I can't remember the exact name of the organization she started, but it was like parents like me.
Like me, yes.
Other parents like me. And it's a perfect example of what it feels like when somebody else is also experiencing what you're experiencing. My daughter is 14 and really struggled through COVID with her mental health. And it was excruciatingly difficult to watch her struggle. It was like one of the worst years of my life too. We were in it together for sure. And, just listening to that shared common experience and somebody who's willing to put it out there, like, it's okay, right? Kids struggle, parents struggle, feels right. It feels like, and that's what self-compassion is, right? It's the ability to just understand that you're not alone in your journey. So that's one that I think we need to start building super early in kids. The more kids know that that's a skill and the earlier they hear it, the less likely when they get to that real trough of despair of self-compassion, which is like grade 7, 8. I swear, I think my daughter's self-compassion went from like a 7 out of 9 on the umbrella assessment to 0 when she got to grade 7. Like it's such a hard time.
That middle school years it's hard.
So hard. So, when I look at that trend, it reminds me that like we need to be talking to our kids about this early and often and teaching them how to think about themselves like that.
Now, you mentioned the pandemic. A lot of kids are like the regression of, when the pandemic came around and they're so used to now being home and sheltered in. Now they have to back out into the world, how can we handle that? Because I know I have a 20-year-old, and she was one of those seniors that was affected by the pandemic. She was a senior, and now it's almost like trying to get her out of the house to go do things with her friends. It's hard because she's so used to being home and not having those issues around her.
Yeah. I mean, this is another example of like the resistance to what is, and that struggle is real. Like, so much of me in my parenting brain wants to just look at my kids and be like, just go back to the way it was. Like, go, come on, you're fine, right? But everybody's changed from that experience, and they are where they are. So I think it's really important first to just be like, okay, this is where we are. What's next? And then the next thing that I usually recommend parents do is just be a bit more curious about what's happening for your child. So just like, even just asking more questions, getting them to think about, their experience, how they're feeling. The listen until fully understood. I don't know if you've heard that before. LUFU, listen until fully understood, is a great way to think about what you should do with your child right now. Just let them share their experience until you feel like you can say, that makes sense. That makes sense to me, that you feel like that, right? And usually it involves a lot more listening than we're actually doing as parents, right? We listen a little, and then we try to be like, what would really solve your problem if you just got out a little more, right? If you just did this, I can see from my perspective that would really help you, instead of really listening until fully understood, till you can say without a doubt, that makes sense. I understand why you feel that way. And then you can start to rebuild from there, right? Because it's going to be a slow journey back. I think we're all going to hopefully get there, or most of us, but it's going to involve a bit more curiosity and parenting care than I think we originally anticipated.
That is so true. And I love the fact that you talked about, as a parent, we need to listen, being active listeners. About some of the things as parents, showing active listening. What are some of the skills that parents need to learn?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I had a really interesting experience. I was working with my husband and Jason Gaddis, who wrote, or he runs the relationship school. He's a really, really interesting guy. And we were doing some work with him, and, we were sharing back and forth, my husband and I, and Jason was facilitating a conversation. And, my husband was trying to explain how he thought I was feeling at that moment, or why I might have behaved the way that I did. And then Jason stopped him and said, have a look at Jen right now. Do you think you're right? Do you think you're nailing it? Do you think this is what, look at her face. And he was like, yeah, no, I'm definitely not getting it right. Right? But like, it's almost like we think we know, and then we just carry on. We push along. I think I know what's going on, right? And we forget to pause and look in the face of the other person, whether it's our child, our spouse, be like, am I getting it right? Is this how you feel? Is this why you yelled at me? Is this why, you were frustrated? And then really just look and see if we're right. Because if we're not, then we need to go back. We need to slow down. We need to like pause and really try to understand, okay, I'm not right. What else? What else don't I know? So that we can fully understand the people we love and care about, so we can actually help them.
Now, you mentioned earlier the umbrella assessment. Talk about that, because I know I've got the link up here on your website where people can take it. But talk about how important it is to take that to assess.
Yeah. Okay. So I love the umbrella assessment. I think it is a tool for you to do for yourself, for your partners that you're parenting with to do, for your kids to do. And it's super fast, takes 10 to 15 minutes, and it goes through the 18 top coping skills that we know have a huge impact on our ability to take on challenges and our well-being. 3 questions each, and then it gives you a score at the end for each of those skills. So you can immediately see, okay, these are my strongest skills. I've got a great growth mindset. I'm really flexible, and I'm very empathetic. And here are my weakest skills. I'm not good at autonomy, and I'm not very intrinsically motivated to do anything, whatever, or I'm not very resilient, And then from that, for your kids, if you're a parent, you can look and see, okay, like how do our umbrellas look the same? How are they different? What skills are really translating to my child? What could I work on that might help them? You can also start to tie them to their strengths. So for your kids, if they know what their strong skills are, they're more likely to use them. And we know that kids, when you use a strength-based parenting approach and just talk about your kids' strengths and help them know what their strong skills are, they're much more likely to use those skills. So the umbrella assessment will give you a really quick idea of what your child's strong skills are that you can start to point out. And then you can pick one skill to work on. And in the back of the book, which looks like this, there's a whole appendix for each skill. So it talks about what each skill is, how to know if that is definitely the skill your child needs to work on. So what are some of the signs that a child might be struggling with that skill? And then some do's and don'ts, like how might I tweak my parenting? What are the big do's and don'ts if my child is struggling with cognitive flexibility or mindfulness or self-compassion? What are the 2 things I can do and the 2 things I can stop doing in order to help my child build that really critical skill? So that's the value of the umbrella assessment. It identifies strengths, but it also helps you pick the one thing that you could do as a parent to have the biggest impact on your child's well-being going forward, instead of the everything, the shotgun approach versus like the one thing that as a parent you could dedicate some solid energy to make a big difference in your child's coping skills. And then, much like an umbrella, what I love about the umbrella metaphor and what it's so research-based is that even if you put one skill back in that umbrella, if you imagine like an umbrella with some holes in it, even one panel that has more integrity will help to protect your child a little more from what's going on in their life. It'll make them more likely to want to go out and take on challenges because they feel a little more in control. And then they'll start to build more skills. And you can start to fill out their umbrella like this. And the more they feel in control, the more likely they are to take on challenges, the more likely they are to have opportunities to build skills. And it's kind of like a snowball in the right direction, but it has to start somewhere. And it starts with the umbrella assessment.
I love how you said play up their strengths, but then pick out one weakness and work on it. Because a lot of times people are focused on what's wrong with everybody and trying to fix what's wrong with everybody.
Yeah.
Multiple things wrong that you get so overwhelmed and people get so down on themselves that they don't want to work at all. So I love that.
It's so true. Yeah. We need to take that 2-tiered approach, right? We want to get the strong stronger, and we want to notice where there's some gaps, because, in my daughter's example, when we did her umbrella assessment and we noticed that her self-compassion was at 0, that was really getting in the way of her well-being. If every time something goes wrong, every time a friend says something that wasn't kind, every time something that sucks but normal happens in her life, which is something I talk about in the book too, is like kind of finding that sucks but normal category for your kids. If every time that happens, she's just so down on herself and beating herself up, well, now we have a real issue. Without that skill, nothing else is working the way that it should. So it can make a huge difference in your child's well-being and in your own.
Well, I love the fact that you said in your own as well, because being a stronger parent and having your child happy will make you happy as well, because then you're not having to fight those daily battles of, how parenting, especially parenting teenage girls, because you just said your daughter's 14 and I went through 3 teenage girls, so I totally understand. But having to battle that, it's hard as a parent to just know when to be quiet and to just let them go.
Yeah, it's a daily struggle for sure. But I'm sure you've probably talked about this on your podcast before. But the idea of co-regulation really helps me parent my teenagers, because I think we are, even though they're pushing away, they're still connected to us, right? They push hard away and then they want to come back and connect again. And co-regulation is just that idea that as we calm ourselves down, our energy translates to them and they can calm down a bit. And when they calm down a bit, it helps to calm us down a bit, and so on, right? The spiral of calm can ensue. But I do think that teenagers, while they're intellectually like grown-ups a lot of the times, I mean, the conversations I have with my teenager most often feel like grown-up conversations. Emotionally, they're not fully developed yet. So as a parent, I think one of our jobs is to be the start of the co-regulation cycle. So it might take you to walk away, take a couple deep breaths, but it's too much to expect your kids to be the ones to start calming themselves down in order to calm you down, in order to start the cycle like that. I think the start of the cycle, and if you don't do anything else as a parent, start the cycle of calm when you're in a conflict with your child. Be the person to take a deep breath and just try to let your nervous system settle a little bit. And then you can, notice it affect your child too.
That is so true, because they play off your emotion. If you're going after them and having really a confrontational, they're going to be confrontational right back at you.
Yeah. And I hear a lot from parents well, there's two of us in this argument. It's me versus my teenager, and we're both in it. So we're both responsible. And while that's true, an adult has a different level of emotional regulation than a teenager. And so it's equal, but it's not. I think you have to respect them as equals intellectually. And you also have to know that your job as a parent is to be more emotionally regulated than them.
So what made you decide to write this book? I mean, you've been implementing in schools, but what made you decide to write so that it could reach more parents?
Yeah, I think I really started my journey working with schools, and we have a whole curriculum that teachers run that teaches all the skills in the classroom, and that's great. But well-being is a multi-stakeholder approach, 100%. No school in the world is going to solve this problem when parents aren't engaged, and no doctor in the world is going to do it without schools. And I really think that medicine and education and parents need to come together to solve this problem. We all need to be on the same page. So the Umbrella Effect, the book, is a place for parents to start to understand that it's okay for their kids to struggle, and that what we really need to be doing is helping them build tools for the struggle, not trying to take that away. And it pairs well with the curriculum in schools, where you can teach a little more intellectually, here's all the skills and here's what they look like, and here's some stories and ideas and ways to build this skill. But I think we need to be kind of sandwiching it on both perspectives. I've had many a parent and many a teacher tell me that they don't know when it became their job to teach kids coping skills, as if parents used to think schools did it and schools used to think parents did it. And suddenly everybody's like, oh my God, somebody needs to do this, right? Oh my gosh. These kids need better coping skills, and whose job is it? And I think it's everybody's job. So the book came from the curriculum and from a demand from schools, help us engage parents in this too. We think this is really meaningful, and we think it's going to change the landscape of mental health, and we just need everybody to help.
That is so true. And I will say that the chapters are very short, and I love how you put skills in with the chapters, because even if a parent can only read it while they're waiting on the car rider line, or if they're waiting in the doctor's office, or just only a few snippets here and there, they can actually glean something from what they're reading.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. And I love reading parenting books, and there's some amazing authors out there. But one of my pet peeves about parenting books is I don't think they're written for parents. A book, I'll be so excited a new book is arriving. It comes to the door from Amazon or whoever I've gotten the chapters, Indigo, and I open it, and it's so thick and long and wordy. And I'm like, who is this written for? I don't have time to read this right now. I need something shorter, concise, that helps me get the takeaway without all of the extra words around it. So I wrote this book for parents. I really sat down on day one with the intention, this is going to be short. It's going to be easy to read. It's going to have really concrete ways to take the message and put it into your parenting. And it's not going to add layers and layers of work to your parenting job. It's going to make it easier. So those were my big ideas when I was formatting the book. So I'm very happy that you picked up on that and found it to be something you liked about it.
Yes, totally something I liked about it. So time is almost up. Do you have one last little nugget before we talk about where people can find your book and find you and all this, all the good stuff? But one last little nugget that you want to share?
I think something we kind of glazed over, but I think is a really important thing that parents could do tonight with their kids, is to sit down and create a list of what is a sucks but normal category in life. I talk about it in the book, and if you want more detail, you can definitely check it out there. But sucks but normal is just all the things in life that don't feel good, that happen to us, that we don't like, but are actually a pretty normal part of life. So, for example, people aren't nice 100% of the time. We would like them to be, they're not. I've asked a million rooms that I've spoken in front of, hands up if you're nice 100% of the time to everybody you know, including your spouse, your parents, and your children. And I've never had anybody put up their hand. So it follows that it's okay. You're going to be on the receiving end of somebody's bad day many times in your life. So that would be something that would go on my sucks but normal category with my kids. Same with like not doing very well on a test. There's lots of reasons why you might not do well on a test. Maybe you didn't have time to study. Maybe the test was written weird. Maybe you didn't understand the question. Right? There's reasons. And so these things, if we can normalize some of the challenges that our kids face and help them understand that like this happens to everybody. It's okay. And also it sucks and you can have feelings. You can hate that feeling. You can be really sad that person said that thing, or you can be really frustrated, but it's still normal. You don't have to hate yourself for those things. You can feel the sadness or whatever it is, and then understand that it's normal and kind of pick yourself up and move through it. So I think that's a really fun activity, fun to do with your kids, and a really useful one.
Sucks but normal. I totally agree. I agree, because there's going to be things that happen in life that you have no control over. So
yeah, exactly. So sit down with your kids tonight, teenagers, young kids, doesn't matter the age, and just make a list of all the things that suck but are normal parts of life. And then from there, you can start to, frame those as in that self-compassion lens of, common humanity. And it's okay. It's okay when things go wrong.
So where can people find you first?
I think our website is the best way to find the assessment and the book. It's umbrellaproject.co. And if you want to follow on social media, if you're an educator, we do a lot of stuff on Twitter for educators at Umbrella PJCT. And likewise on Instagram, that's a great place if you're a parent to follow. Again, at Umbrella PJCT. And I put out lots of parenting tips and videos and different little things from tidbits from my life that really helped me in my parenting journey. And I think it's a valuable place to start.
And the book, The Umbrella Effect, is on Amazon, but where else can you find it?
So you can find it on our website. There's several different links through different independent resources. It's also on Barnes and Noble, and so you can find it there.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I know we had to cut this one a little bit short, but I would love for you to come back on in the new year and talk about how we can deal more with coping skills and teach coping skills with our kids.
Mm-hmm. I would love to. Let's do that for sure.
Yeah. Guys, I will put on all the show notes everywhere you can find Dr. Jen. I call her Dr. Jen because I just think it's so cool, because it's like a that. It's like Dr. Phil, Dr.
I have a lot of pediatric patients, so Dr. Jen just stuck.
Oh, well, then I worked then. And I will say, I definitely highly recommend this book, even though my kids are grown. Like I have a 20, 25, and a 27. I actually sat and listened. I listened because I did it through,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I did it through Audible or I did it through Kindle, but I listened to it as I was working. And I was just loving the fact that you made it so simple and so informative for parents. And even though they were small chapters, they were packed full of information. So I want to thank you for that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. I'm really glad. I think there's a saying that like your kids are never not your kids. So it really is for everyone. Doesn't matter if they're grown.
You can actually apply some of the skills to yourself as well.
For sure.
So Dr. Jen, thank you so much for coming on. And guys, we will see you on the next episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. Bye.
Bye.